أمهات الأنبياء وخير الأتقياء والصالحين سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. We'll be continuing today, inshallah, with the hadith. Every week, inshallah, we're trying to go over one of the hadith from the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi. And today we are on hadith number 5. So welcome if you're joining us for the first time. And so the hadith, as we will start, is عن أم المؤمنين عبد الله عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من أحدث في أمرنا هذا ما ليس منه فهو راد. رواه البخاري ومسلم. وفي رواية مسلم وفي رواية المسلم من عمل عملا ليس عليها أمرنا فهو رد. So translation for this is whosoever introduces into this affair of ours, into Islam, is something that is not already belonging to it, it is to be rejected. And in another narration from Imam Muslim, whosoever works a work which has for it no command of ours is to be rejected. And so this narration is from al-Mu'mineen, the mother of the believers, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. So we'll start there, talking a little bit about her, and we'll talk a little bit about the hadith, inshallah.
Can you repeat it in Arabic? I was reading Quran. Can you repeat it again in Arabic?
The hadith?
Yeah, I was reading Quran. I was in the page.
قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من أحدث في أمرنا هذا ما ليس منه فهو رد. رد. فهو رد. Yeah. It's rejected, exactly. So Aisha is the daughter of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Abu Bakr al-Taymi al-Qurashi, so from the tribe of Banu Taym, from Quraysh. She is the third wife of the Prophet ﷺ, and she's the only wife of the Prophet ﷺ who was not widowed or divorced before marrying the Prophet ﷺ. She's known as Abdullah, even though she doesn't have any children. And the most common explanation for this is that she never had any children, but she asked the Prophet ﷺ to give her a kunniya, which is the name that's given, that's based on your family. So like the mother of someone or the daughter of someone. So she asked the Prophet ﷺ to give her a kunniya even though she didn't have children. So he named her Abdullah, the mother of Abdullah. And some people have explained that because her nephew, Abdullah, so she had a sister named Hafsa. Hafsa is also the daughter of Abu Bakr. And she had a son named Abdullah bin Zubayr. He was a very famous companion. And so some people say that she was named Abdullah because she was essentially the aunt of Abdullah bin Zubayr. And so she had several nicknames. The Prophet ﷺ would call her Humayra al-Saddiqa, Abu Bakr al-Saddiq, and she was a Saddiqa. Aish, so he would give her kind of like a little nickname, Aish instead of Aisha. And al-Mu'mineen, which is the name given to all the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. So the mother of the believers. She accepted Islam very early. She was born into Islam actually. And she, by hadith narrated by Abdullah's brother, so Abdullah had a brother named Urwa bin Zubayr. And Urwa said in a narration that Aisha radiallahu anha said that there wasn't a day basically where the Prophet ﷺ didn't visit their household when they were in Mecca. So Aisha, when she was living with her father Abu Bakr, there was barely any days where the Prophet ﷺ didn't visit them. He would come almost every single day, which shows you the close relationship the Prophet ﷺ had with Abu Bakr. And she has so many, obviously amazing attributes. The Quran mentions her directly and indirectly in the Quran. She is the spouse of the Prophet ﷺ in this world and in the Akhirah. And the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that Aisha, compared to the other women, is like tharid compared to food. And tharid was the Prophet ﷺ's favorite food, and it's also one of the best foods that the Arabs had, which is like this really like meal with a lot of meat in it, and it was really, really good. And so he said that that's like how much like she stood out amongst all the other women. And some of the attributes in terms of her knowledge is kind of astounding when you read upon it. Imam al-Hakam said that about 1/4 of the rulings that we have come from things narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha. And Abu Musa al-Ash'ari said that there was no confusion during the time that she was alive because she was so knowledgeable that anytime anyone had any questions, she would be able to answer it. And there was another man who said that he witnessed the khutbahs of Umar and the khutbahs of Uthman and the khutbahs of Ali. He said no one was able to match Aisha radiallahu anha in her eloquence and in her knowledge. Aisha, someone said, Imam Zuhri said that Aisha's knowledge compared to the knowledge of all other people. If you put like Aisha on one side of a scale and everyone else's knowledge of Islam on another scale, Aisha most likely had more knowledge than everyone else. And she narrated 2,000 hadith, so she was one of the most, the people who narrate the most hadith. She spent 10 years with the Prophet ﷺ, and in those 10 years she learned a lot and was with him all the time, consistently, and revelation was even revealed when they were together. And she also has the distinction of being with him when he passed away. The Prophet ﷺ asked to be with Aisha as he passed away, and he died in her lap with her saliva in his mouth, actually, because the miswak, the stick that they use for brushing, she wet it for him, and then she brushed his teeth before he passed away because he asked for it. So he died in her house, on her lap, with saliva in his mouth, and that's like how close he was. There's a Sahabi named Amr ibn al-As, who joined Islam pretty late. He used to be an enemy of Islam. He's the one who went to Habasha to try to argue against the Muslims. He eventually became a Muslim. And the Prophet ﷺ had this beautiful, beautiful quality where every person he met, that person felt like they were the most important and most loved person to the Prophet ﷺ in that moment. And so Amr ibn al-As had a few interactions with the Prophet, and he felt like, wow, I must be his favorite person ever. So he wanted to, like, just to show everyone, he went to the Prophet ﷺ and asked, like, who's your favorite person? And he said, Aisha. And he said, okay, fine, that's fair, like, it's his wife. And said, from the men, how about from the men? And then he said, her father. And then he said, who? And then some narrations say Umar, and then Uthman, and then Ali. And then eventually he stopped asking because he was afraid that he's not going to be mentioned at all. But it shows you that every person, even someone who joined late, thought that the Prophet ﷺ loved him the most. And it also shows you the first person that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned at the time was Aisha. And you know, she lives quite a bit after. She lives until the year 58 after Hijrah. She lives after the time of Ali, so she lives into Muawiyah's Khilafah. And she's asked to be buried in the Baqi', where she's still buried to this day. And her janazah was led by Abu Hurairah, and she was buried by her nephews, Abdullah and Zubair. So this is Urwa and Zubair. So that's about Aisha, a little more detail. The hadith itself mentions bid'ah, which is this word we hear a lot. Bid'ah means innovation or something that's new, something that wasn't there before. Ibtida' means like to begin something. And so a good place to start, and so I'm getting this information from Mufti Hussein Kamani's lectures. You can find them on the podcast. And he starts by understanding its opposite. He said a good way to understand anything, to really learn something, a good way to learn it is by learning its opposite. So if you want to learn what hot really means, you need to understand what cold is, and then you really understand what hot means when you experience it. If you want to experience happiness, you need to know what sadness feels like. And so similarly, to know what bid'ah is, you should understand its opposite, and the opposite is sunnah. And if you understand that anything the opposite of sunnah must be not good, so that's a good place to start. So sunnah is any practice of the Prophet ﷺ. It includes like actions, statements he made, approvals or disapprovals he had, times when he was silent on an issue, physical characteristics, internal characteristics, and part of his personality, his biography. These things are all part of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Quran commands us, so the hadith commands us, but also the Quran commands us to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And so some people in Surah Al-Mulk, it says, لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. Allah created death and life to test you, which of you is best in deeds. And some people, when they're trying to understand what this means, what does it mean to have the best of deeds? They define there's really two attributes that make a deed better, the best. One is its sincerity. We talked about that in the first hadith, your intention behind it. And the second part of it is how close it follows the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, how close is it to the hadith. And so that makes it the best of deeds. In another ayah it says, يَوْمَ تَبَيَّضُ الْوُجُوهُ وَتَسْوَدُ الْوُجُوهُ. So Ibn Abbas says that, and Ibn Abbas was a Sahabi that was one of the best commentators of the Quran. He said that this means that it's a day, talking about the Day of Judgment, this is a day where some faces will be lit up with light and other faces are darkened. And so he said the light face is the people who follow the sunnah, and the dark faces are those who innovated and rejected the sunnah. And so back then there's also this concept of judging people on how well they can follow a trail. If you can imagine living in a nomadic desert society, if you're able to follow a sandy trail that doesn't leave much of a path, that's like a sign of intelligence and ability to survive and trade and do all these things. And the Prophet ﷺ, and that's a really good metaphor because the Prophet ﷺ traveled in this life and he left for us a path that's very well preserved and we know it very well. And so it's our job to try to follow that path as close as we can. Sufyan al-Thawri said that hold on to the path of truth even if you don't find anyone on it. So just because not many people are on a specific path doesn't make it wrong. So we know that the Prophet ﷺ led us to the right path, and we should stick on it, regardless of who we see on it. And wisdom is granted to those who are follow, and misguidance to those who reject this path, because it's the best path. And there's so many stories you can mention, and I don't think I'll have time to go into like specific stories. But Yusuf Jampuri, who's a very famous muhaddith of the subcontinent, he says that if you love the sunnah, Allah will honor you. And he has a very personal story that's very beautiful related to that. And so if you think about it, there's been 1,400 years of people dedicating their entire lives and intellect to trying to preserve and act on the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And this started from the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The Sahaba tried to do their best to preserve and teach and spread the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ. And along with the Quran, the Sunnah, these are two golden eggs really in Islam. Like, this is what makes Islam unique. If someone asks you what makes Islam different than any other religion or philosophy or anything, like why, like these are it, because not only are they like truth and revelation from God Himself, but they're preserved perfectly. And you have it's not just like something that an imam will say you have to follow blindly. It's like there's evidence for it. It's documented. Like, it's so well preserved, the Quran and the Sunnah, and that's a really huge blessing for us, because it takes care of a lot of kind of internal faith issues, to know that you can say with confidence, or a certain degree of confidence, that what I'm hearing here is narrated back to my Prophet, and we can take it. And you can start to understand here why bid'ah then is so evil. Because if you imagine like religion, like a good metaphor might be like you have a cup of water, and this cup of water, you're going to take it and pass it on to this next generation, the next person, and then the next person, the next person. And each time you pass that cup, you take a little sip, you might benefit from it. Your job is to, when you're passing it, to not dirty it, and to not drop it, and not spill any out. And so as much as possible, you're trying to carry this water till it reaches the end goal. And so every time someone drops a little dirt in that water, it makes the dirty water for everyone behind them. And that's a huge sin, if you can imagine that. It's a huge, and it's not just water, it's the entire deen of Allah. So that's why it becomes such a big deal. And if you learn about the Prophet ﷺ, like, it makes it easier, because we shouldn't be, we should imitate, but we shouldn't imitate emptily. Like, it shouldn't be this blind imitation. It should be this imitation where you understand who he was and you love him. It's like based in love. The more you learn about the Prophet ﷺ, the more you love him. The more you love him, the easier it'll be to practice. And the more you surround yourself with people who practice, the easier it'll be to practice also. And there's a hadith that says, whoever follows him will enter Jannah. And there's a hadith even like where an example of a Bedouin who enters on a gathering with the Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ sitting there. And he asks, who is Muhammad? So if you imagine, like, it's a gathering of people and he doesn't even know which one is Muhammad. He's not like wearing a crown or something. So you see how much people are trying to imitate him, and how easy it was to imitate him at the time. So this leads us to bid'ah, and I'll just go very briefly over like the technical kind of aspect of it. So there's a lot of different meanings people give. Imam Nawawi himself says that it's everything that's done without prior example in the Sharia and innovated after the era of the Prophet ﷺ. And so usually the connotation could be positive, and others depending on the situation. A mubtadi' is someone who's an innovator. An innovator is not necessarily wrong. Like, if you're an innovator in engineering, like, that's not a bad thing at all. It's only when in the context of deen that it becomes something that's bad. And so there's two types of ibtida' in the deen. There's ibtida' i'tiqadi, which